is Stella, and I'll be presenting my research paper challenging fossil fuel corporate campaigns, examining greenwashing ads through a visual, moral, and genre lens. Okay. I'll begin by giving a bit of background. Since the Paris Climate Agreement, climate justice lawsuits against the major fossil fuel corporations have surged. Out of the 86 global cases, 38% demand climate damage compensation, 16% accuse corporations of misleading advertising, and 12% accuse corporations of failing to reduce emissions. According to Oil Change International, between 1985 and 2018, the climate damage costs from the top 25 largest gas and oil corporations were estimated at $20 trillion, with ExxonMobil, BP, and Shell liable for $1 trillion each. But despite their substantial environmental impact, these corporations have largely managed to avoid accountability. Understanding how this lack of accountability began requires taking a step back in history. Knowledge of global warming and the detrimental role of fossil fuels has existed since the 1950s. By the 1980s, many fossil fuel corporations couldn't deny even privately the environmental damages associated with their industries. And as public and government concern grew, these corporations began viewing global warming policies as threats to their industry. So to preserve it, they began launching campaigns that minimized the threat of global warming, seeking to shift government and public attitudes. And one way they did this was through video ads. So video advertising became a key tool because it provides an enriched viewing experience that includes elements like vivid imagery, music, and emotional appeal. Research has found that even a 30-second greenwashed ad can effectively sway consumer belief. And while the effectiveness of these advertisements has been studied over time, little research has explored why. So this led me to develop my research question. How do fossil fuel corporations attempt to persuade viewers to adopt pro-industry attitudes using greenwashed video advertising? To answer, I conducted three analyses: a semiotics analysis, understanding how the advertisements construct meaning, a moral foundations theory analysis to identify the moral values targeted, and finally, a popular cultural genre analysis to understand how the advertisements emotionally resonate with viewers. To begin, I selected 4 advertisements from 4 major oil corporations: ExxonMobil, BP, Chevron, and Shell. These corporations were chosen because their pledges to shift to renewable energy significantly contradict their actions, and their greenwashing accusations were described as well-founded. So I also studied each advertisement across 4 periods, ranging from the 1980s to 2020, to observe any potential trends as climate change awareness increases. So I started with my semiotic analysis. To give a bit of background, semiotics is the study of signs and how they influence social life. A sign is anything representative that can be interpreted to have meaning. Some examples of signs include things such as words, images, sounds, flavors, colors, or even camera angles. But to understand the meaning of a sign, it has to be deconstructed into 2 categories: the signifier and the signified. The signifier is more physical, consisting of things like words or images, while the signified is the idea that emerges from the signifier. And together, they provide meaning to the sign. So modeling after another researcher, I constructed a semiotics chart and isolated the major signs in each advertisement. After breaking the signs into categories, I identified the signifier and then determined the signifier. Doing so allowed me to see how all 4 advertisements constructed meaning, as well as which persuasion strategies the corporations use. Next, I analyzed the advertisements using the moral foundations theory. The theory is used to understand political differences across 6 foundations: care harm, fairness cheating, loyalty betrayal, authority subversion, sanctity degradation, and liberty oppression. Studies have shown that liberals and conservatives value different foundations, with liberals resonating more with care and fairness, while conservatives resonating equally among the 6. When applied to fossil fuel advertisements, the moral foundations theory can help understand appeals to specific morals, and also help identify potentially targeted groups. So I used the Moral Foundations Dictionary to do a content analysis of the languages and themes used in each advertisement. As shown in this simplified example, the dictionary lists words that correspond with each moral foundation. After selecting the words that represented each advertisement, I created a foundation indications chart to record the selected words. Then, I identified the foundation with the highest word count as the most dominant. The real dictionary contains over 200 words per foundation, and for my analysis, I recorded the top 3 most dominant foundations per advertisement. So after completing the moral foundations analysis, I moved on to genre. By implementing storytelling techniques, advertisements can turn uninteresting topics such as policy into captivating, persuasive stories that viewers remember. The combination of audio, visuals, and narratives can create a genre that influences emotion. So for every advertisement, I recorded the plot, sound, structure, characters, setting, and music to determine the genre. After doing so, I researched how that genre emotionally resonates with viewers. And to my surprise, all analysis revealed interesting shifts. I'll begin with the semiotic results. Advertisement 1 was a strong example of corporate environmental greenwashing, which is the intentional and false portrayal of a corporation's actions as environmentally friendly. Advertisement 2 showed a subtler form of claim greenwashing, which uses imagery of green progress to suggest that a company is becoming cleaner without offering any real evidence. Advertisement 3, however, marked a shift from greenwashing to responsibility shifting. And responsibility shifting is a technique that frames products as risks and not as causes of climate damage. This minimizes public concern, allows corporations to profit from the idea of being a risk taker, while also, and most importantly, pushing the blame of climate change onto consumers as a demand problem. Finally, advertisement 4 demonstrated environmental marketplace advocacy, which promotes the benefits of a service while downplaying the environmental consequences. Across all 4 periods, these strategies became increasingly more subtle. The genre analysis experienced a similar evolution. Advertisement 1 adopted fantasy-like characteristics, a genre that regulates emotion, centers on the individual, and stimulates empathy. This may allow the viewer to associate the advertisement's positive emotional outcome with the brand itself. And the results in advertisement 2 are likely similar, as the science fiction genre shares many qualities with fantasy. By contrast, advertisement 3 and 4 move towards the documentary genre. Documentary genres are reality-based films that use a combination of facts, narratives, documentations, and film choices to construct a story that appeals to emotion. Repeated exposure to emotion and judgments may solidify feelings and eventually influence ideology. And because documentaries are also seen as more truthful, these later ads hold greater rhetorical power than the first two. Next, I'll move on to the Moll Foundation results. So one result that I found interesting was that the dominant foundations through all 4 periods were also the strongest foundations liberals and conservatives identify with within the context of environmentalism. As shown in the graph, during period 1, both liberal foundations, care and fairness, and conservative ones, loyalty, authority, and sanctity, were represented. However, appeals to sanctity dropped sharply between periods 2 and 3, while loyalty rose. This is significant because of loyalty's powerful influence on decision-making. In highly political contexts, people often make decisions based off their sense of in-group identity. For example, liberals tend to express more positive attitudes towards environmental protection, while conservatives tend to be a little bit more skeptical. These views are reinforced by loyalty to their political groups. And because loyalty strongly shapes decision-making, and fossil fuel corporations are aiming to influence consumers, the rising appeal to loyalty in periods 2, 3, and 4 suggests a greater effort to tap into group influence. The decline and regrowth of care and authority should also be noted, however, as they are both core liberal and conservative foundations. To conclude, my research project aimed to understand how fossil fuel corporations are attempting to persuade viewers to adopt pro-industry attitudes using video advertisements. To summarize, the results suggest that fossil fuel corporations are using increasingly discrete methods to influence viewers, are increasingly emphasizing loyalty to the environment and societal well-being, and are increasingly positioning themselves as public informants. And while my results suggest a few interesting behavior changes, a few limitations must be acknowledged. First, I only analyzed 4 video advertisements, limiting the generalization of these results. Second, I found scarce information about the emotional response of the science fiction genre, limiting advertisement 2 genre analysis. And finally, I was the only coder throughout this project. Future research should address these limitations, and I encourage further exploration between periods 2 and 4, which experienced the most dramatic shifts in all analysis. Thank you.
All right, so does everyone have any questions for either of our presenters?
I have a question for both of you. What would you say was your hardest part of research?
I would say it's definitely like putting my own bias aside, because I think going into it, I wanted to believe that short form media wasn't that influential, and I could be like ignorant to the fact that it does have an influence on us and our perceptions. So I would say getting past the personal bias to really open up your research.
That's a good question. I think for me, the most challenging part of this project was narrowing it down. When I started, I wanted to analyze advertisements across 4 years, and I wanted to analyze a lot